And we are live with week 2 of the Gridiron Address. Joining me for this week is my good friend Chris Deluca and host of the new Boom Broadcasting show, Dugout Debrief. Chris, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good today. It was a great set of games today.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll touch on this later. Carolina abysmal again. I'm at a loss for words after 2 weeks of this, but to start out with week 2, we will hit on the Ravens game. Baltimore starting out the year 0-2. They looked slow against a really not very good Raiders team. They gave up 13 unanswered in the fourth quarter and ended up losing the game 26-23. Chris, on a scale from 1 to 10, how concerned are you with this loss for Baltimore and the fact that they've started the season 0-2?
Well, I think it gets pretty hard after here. And I think that even if you're putting 0-2 aside, they have the Dallas Cowboys next. And then after that, they have the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and after that's Washington and then Tampa. That is not easy. And that's a hard division, especially because, as we'll get into later, Pittsburgh Steelers have some weaker opponents over the next 2 weeks. And these first quarter season matchups are the most important matchups of the year. So I am quite concerned about Baltimore, not talent-wise, because I think that they're one of the most talented teams. I'm more just concerned about their ability to win from behind in that incredibly, incredibly hard division.
Alrighty. And do you think that this rough form early in the season for Baltimore will continue, or do you think that they will be able to bounce back and compete for a playoff spot or possibly a division title?
I think they'll be able to compete for a playoff spot at the minimal. I mean, they're still good. They're still relevant, obviously. I mean, they the way that they structure their offense, I've always admired, because a lot of people will give, bad to Greg Roman. But the one thing that I do respect about him is he set that Baltimore offense up to be completely based around what works for Lamar. And that's the big thing that matters.
And looking at this schedule, let's take a look at just the next 4 weeks. They have some really tough matchups with Dallas. Dallas looked atrocious against the Saints. I am incredibly disappointed. I never thought that I would root for the Dallas Cowboys ever in my life, but I had to against the Saints because there's no situation where I would ever hope for anything good to happen to the Saints. And I was let down by the Cowboys for hopefully the first and only time in my life. But still, even after Dallas's rough performance this week, that'll be a tough opponent for them. They got Buffalo. Josh Allen is top 5 quarterback in the league. That'll be tough. Away at Cincinnati.
It's always a hard place to play there, regardless of how they look. They did not look disciplined today, but that Paul Brown Stadium or whatever they call it now, I think it's I don't remember, something with an RAY, something like that. Very, very hard place to play.
And then their most winnable game will be home against Washington. I think that should be pretty easy for them.
Yeah, but Tampa's hard.
Tampa's hard too. Cleveland, Denver. I think that's a couple easy wins for them. Cincy, Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh hasn't looked good, but their defense is elite.
Yeah, I mean, especially in that week 11, and again, we're going to get more into the Steelers later, ladies and gentlemen. But that's November. That's a November matchup at Acrisure. I still call it Heinz. I know I'm a traditionalist, but
it's always going to be Heinz.
It's always going to be Heinz. I was so sad that they took those ketchup bottles down. But yeah, I mean, that's always a hard place to play in Pittsburgh, regardless of talent level.
But yeah, I think Baltimore is a good team, but in a worst case scenario, I could see them starting the season 0-5 because Dallas away, Buffalo at home, and Cincy away is a rough 3-game stretch. I don't think that they'll go 0-5 to start the year because they're just too good. I see them beating Dallas and Cincy, even though that's a couple tough away games. But in no scenario could I say that the Ravens are going to go 0-5 to start the year. Chris, how likely do you think that scenario is that Baltimore starts the year 0-5?
I think it's unlikely because I think they're going to pull one of those off. I think that they're going to either beat Baltimore or Cincinnati. I think they'll beat some combination of that. Next week, we do our picks, obviously. Next week, I will be picking Dallas if that's one of the picks that we're having on the Out of Pocket podcast, which obviously you should be giving that a listen. Buffalo or Cincinnati, some combination of that. Cincinnati did not look good the first week, and then but they looked undisciplined against Kansas City. Let's just say with those penalties at the end of the game.
Yeah, real quick. Friend of the show, Podcast Smitty, showing some love. I appreciate you watching, Shannon. And now to segue into segment 2, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Chris, this is your team. You're a Pittsburgh guy, repping them on the show. Give us your thoughts on Pittsburgh's performance.
I mean, it was a hard watch as always. It was almost like watching WVU's offense against Pitt this weekend. It was like back to back, in the same stadium not the same stadium, but the same teams playing the same because the NFL game's in Denver. But ugly as always offensively. I mean, the big question right now is Justin Fields the man? We're going to see on the health of Russell Wilson. Justin Fields looks solid by the pocket presence wise. And that's the same way that Russell Wilson looks. It's just the downfield. And that's the big thing that concerns me. I mean, if you really look at it, like George Pickens should not have to make a one-handed catch or attempt to make a one-handed catch on a routine little slant check down kind of play. And that's something that I saw 3 times, Aaron. I witnessed that 3 times this game. And it was just an overthrow or an underthrow. And I'm just like, my guy, how do you do that? But overall, the offense looks absolutely atrocious as it did before. And I don't understand it because we have an amazing wide receiver in George Pickens. In fact, I'm wearing his number 14 jersey right now. Najee Harris and Justin Fields should be good being Pat Freiermuth. I mean, it's just there's so many pieces there, yet it's this weird the best way I can explain it is if anybody's ever played Minecraft, it's like if you're stuck in those little, sludge balls or whatever, like you're just like stuck in one of those and you just can't move. And that's just kind of the way it feels every time we go on offense. And I'm happy that Justin Fields threw for a touchdown, and that was nice. It was to Darrell Washington, I believe, which was interesting. I think that was his first career touchdown too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember thinking that Washington was going to be great. I wanted Carolina to take him. Big athletic tight end. Really fun to watch. Boom Broadcasting president Michael Davis should have put more respect on Pittsburgh this week. I mean, it's Pittsburgh playing a bad team. Of course, they're going to win in the most Pittsburgh way possible.
Yeah, it's almost like
under 20 and almost shutting their opponent out.
Yeah, it's almost like Michael did not pick the Steelers to have as many wins as I did. But, I looked at our schedule, and that was the thing we were talking about before the show, right, Aaron? Is that strength of schedule. That's a thing that I did not understand. So whenever we do our fantasy drafts, we always look at the strength of schedule for defenses. We look less about the defensive talent, more about the strength of schedule. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, we have the Chargers next week. After that, we have the Indianapolis Colts. Richardson did not look amazing. We have Dallas. That's a loss. The Raiders, winnable. The Jets, not looked amazingly hot. They won today. Aaron Rodgers got his first win. Then Giants, not great. Washington, not great. Baltimore, going to be hard. Cleveland, Cincy. Cleveland, again, going to be hard. Philly, really hard. Baltimore, hard. And then Kansas City, really hard. And then to finish out the year, we got Cincy. But the thing is the early part of that schedule, a lot of that's winnable. And that's the thing that I don't understand is how people are counting us out just because of that strength of schedule.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think that their strength of schedule is particularly hard, but what stood out to me the most is if we look at that Christmas Day game against Kansas City, look at what platform it is streaming on and just what's happening with the sport that we love, that a game is on Netflix.
Don't even get me started with that. I mean, as a baseball fan, I can definitely attest to that. I was just complaining with one of my best friends who's a big Braves fan, and she was giving the same complaints about the fact that she could not watch this very, very pivotal matchup, which I actually have right on my TV, game 1 of this, of the Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves. And it was on Apple TV Plus, and nobody has that. And it's incredibly frustrating. We were just both talking about how frustrating it is to not be able to watch a pivotal matchup. And now the NFL has also done this, and it's so sad.
It really is. Michael back in the comments again. Steelers got a brutal second half, need as many wins now as they can get.
Right.
I think he's
Right.
spot on with that.
Yep, he is
honestly.
spot on. I 100%.
And mouthing off with Mike, y'all sounded like my pops talking about that Netflix game.
Oh, come
You're
on.
not wrong.
Come on, man. We're right, though.
Look, if I kind of sound like an old head talking about that, I'm okay with sounding like an old head. In all honesty, it's absurd.
I don't think it's an old head necessarily to not want to have to pay for 50 different services, though. You know?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, fortunately, I have Netflix. I'm not paying for it. I got it as a Christmas present.
Yeah.
But yeah, and third segment, the one I have been looking forward to the least. My Carolina Panthers scored. How many points did they score? I think they scored 3 points. Offense looked worse somehow. I don't think they got a single third down conversion all game until a fourth down conversion late in the fourth quarter in garbage time when they were already going to lose. Every other pass, it felt like, was just a check down 2 yards from the line of scrimmage. And any time that Dave Canales decided to let Bryce Young throw downfield, it was almost an interception, or it was actually an interception. It almost feels like time to hit the panic button on Bryce Young for me. Because, I mean, this game could have been so much uglier because the Chargers, it felt like they made a lot of super easy errors throughout the whole game. They should have put up 40 plus on us, in all honesty. But some errors from Herbert, bad throws. Oh, Carson Williams, host of Lombardi Party on Boom Broadcasting, Panthers are going 0-17, calling it right now. I don't entirely disagree with you, honestly. Let's take a look at their schedule right now. It's not great. There's a couple winnable games for them, but I mean, if they look how they've looked, it's just not going to be good. Next week they're at Vegas. That's a loss. Cincy, I think they get smoked by Cincy. I zero faith. Chicago's going to be tough. I mean, our defense isn't good. I think Caleb Williams will probably beat us. The most winnable game for a while, I feel like, is Atlanta. Atlanta hasn't looked particularly good. Week one, they looked bad. Kirk Cousins' terrible debut. Away against Washington and Denver. That's 2 rookie quarterbacks. Maybe they squeeze one in there. I don't know. I don't feel super confident about that. Then they got the Saints again. I just hope they can make that a competitive game. And then, for whatever reason, the NFL has decided to torture the German people and force them to watch the Panthers versus the Giants on NFL Network, which is just a nightmare game. I feel terrible for them. Maybe ATL or the Giants, 2 wins. Just don't trade that number 1 pick away. I mean, Quinn Ewers is probably fixing to be a Carolina Panther. Chris, how are you feeling about this Panthers team right now?
It's rough. And like we were talking about before the show, I can use baseball analogies that I'm just so scared that they're going to be turning into a Chicago White Sox kind of team where it's just beyond foreseeable future fixability, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Washington game is winnable. I think the Denver and New York game is winnable. I see you guys winning about 3 games, maybe. And like I said, we were speaking about this before, is I feel like you can get a random division fluke. I think you'll get Atlanta on one. And I know it sounds crazy. I think that you'll randomly beat Atlanta or maybe even the Saints or something like that. You'll catch them on an off day. But I have you guys winning about 3 or 4. It's rough. And I'm rooting for Bryce. I root for everybody. But he just looks like mouthing off what Mike just said right now. He just looks lost. He just looks off. And I think a lot of it has to do with weapons that he has. And it's just a lack thereof.
Well, here's the thing is I felt like this was true last season, not to say that the offensive line has been great. I think it has been better without a doubt. And there were plenty of plays where Young just didn't hit his receivers. He had receivers open and he didn't hit them. He's rolling out really often. When there's not always pressure, I feel like that's unnecessary. And when there is pressure, I feel like he just panics. And the good decision making that we saw from him at Alabama just goes right out the window,
He had a
which
much better
is
offensive line in Alabama
just
too, which
terrible.
is a big thing.
You're not wrong. He did have a
And
really
less
good offensive
talented
line, but
defenses too, but still.
there's only so much that we can put on other people, other players, the coaching staff before we actually have to look at Bryce Young and question if he will actually be the solution in Carolina or if he would unfortunately be a bust.
It's hard to tell, but I think it's just too early to tell. I mean, a lot of it's going to come down to those easier matchups that we were talking about before. That's what a lot of it kind of comes down to, is just their ability to win those. I mean, he needs to have like a 3-touchdown game, over 250 yards. He needs to show that. And even putting beside the statistics, he just needs to show that he is able to move the ball, move himself, have the footwork. Like I was just talking about this weekend on my TikTok account with DJ Ungalele, just like the lack of awareness and all of that. And that's my fear with Bryce, is that with how great these defenses that he's playing against, plus with how weak his offensive line is he's going to be sitting there standing like the Statue of Liberty. And I don't mean the play type from the 1950s, you know?
Yeah, it's rough. I'm okay with seeing him struggle. That's part of being a young quarterback in this league. It is tough to play in the NFL, but I just need to see some improvement. And if anything, I feel like we're seeing regression, which is not good. So I'm not going to hit the panic button just yet. It's still super early in the season. But if by like week 14, 15, we don't see him actually put up some good performances and look like the player that we saw at Alabama, then I think we need to hit the panic button and seriously consider taking a quarterback in the 2025 draft.
I'll be interested to see if you guys do. I mean, it's a hard decision to make, especially with how recent that Bryce was drafted. But this quarterback stock is much better this draft than it has been in the recent few years. So I'm very, very fascinated to see what Carolina's draft strategy will be this offseason, because I feel like you guys will be probably a top 3, and that's not a bad. I mean,
You're
it's a
not
bad
wrong.
thing, but it's not a bad thing future-wise, a bad thing
I don't hate
current-wise.
it.
But it is what it is, you know?
Speaking of young quarterbacks, Andrew in the comments, Washington fan Jaden Daniels with a pretty solid stat line led them to a win over division rival New York Giants. Solid performance of him. What do you think of Jaden Daniels, Chris?
Overall, I think that he's a guy that really needs to be developed. And my big fear with him is simply because he plays for one of the most inept organizations. I feel like now that they have, moved on to new ownership, they'll be slightly better. And I think that there will be a culture change. But overall, it's going to really depend on the Washington leadership's ability to not just ruin this guy. And it's not even calling out Washington fans. It's calling out the ownership and the management of the past in general. This is the turning point for that organization, that they need to prove that they are no longer that just inept, okay with 5-win seasons or an 8-win division season. And I think that overall, how he's looked based on what I've seen of him, he has a much better pocket presence than a lot of other guys. And he showed improvement this week, and a little improvement is improvement. And I think he's going to continue to do that.
And now segueing to some highlights from the other games, because, we can only watch so many games. So, we try and pay attention to big things that have happened. I watched the Panthers game. I watched the Chiefs game that just wrapped up. They pulled off a last-second field goal, of course, because they gave Patrick Mahomes 2.5 minutes to go down the field. So it's inevitable that they're going to get down and score. But starting off our little highlight segment, Marvin Harrison Jr. finally arrives. 4 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns, one of them being a 60-yarder. Do you think that this is the start of a dynamic duo or in Arizona, or will it be more of a one-off type of situation?
It's hard to tell. I can't really give you a straight answer, to be honest, Aaron. I mean, you really just have to watch and tell with a rookie. He's an explosive wide receiver. I thought it was very interesting how he only had 4 receptions, despite the fact that he had like 130 yards. It's just wild as chunk plays, and that's kind of a representation of that Arizona offense, if you ask me. It's very boom or bust, and that's why I don't see Arizona being more than a 5-win team. So not necessarily because they're terrible, but just because it's such a boom or bust kind of team. I believe that he will continue to be good, and he will stay at a rate. Obviously, the rate that he's at right now is not sustainable. There's no such thing as a wide receiver that's going to be putting up those kind of numbers every single week. It's not. We're not in the days of Randy Moss and Jerry Rice anymore, and Calvin and Megatron as well. So I don't think that what he has is sustainable necessarily, but I believe what he has been doing he'll continue to improve or at least maintain consistency.
It's a tricky situation because I absolutely love Marvin Harrison Jr. as a prospect. The only issue, his only defect, is that he has Kyler Murray at quarterback, another short quarterback you can't really see over his offensive line. So that for me is where the issues with consistency comes up. I feel like if he had a more solid quarterback, we would see better numbers out of him from week to week. But then again, it's only week 2. I hope it's the start of a dynamic duo in Arizona, because that would be really fun to watch. Because when Kyler Murray's on, I find him extremely entertaining. I don't know about you, but Kyler Murray in the groove is very fun.
Very much so. I agree with you 100%. And former baseball player, former shortstop. I don't blame him for the path that he took. I would have done the same thing if I were him. So I love watching him, play too. And I feel bad for him because the height issue is not his fault. Like, you're born how you're born. And I think that he's done his best. That's why I always kind of dislike the short jokes about him, because it's like, and this is coming from a guy who's 6'3", by the way, but it's like, why talk bad about this man because of his height when he's doing everything that he can based on his physical attributes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tricky argument. It does come into play to some extent, like, to kick it back to Bryce Young with him rolling out so much. A lot of that could be due to the fact that he just can't see the field too clearly over these massive offensive linemen. But kicking it over back to the Saints that we mentioned earlier, they looked dominant against a Dallas team that I thought their defense was really good. Chris, do you think that this game today says more about the Saints or the Cowboys?
I think it says more about the Saints, to be honest with you. That defense has been great, and that offense has been great too. I think that now that they've had the year or so to settle in with Derek Carr, they can finally kind of find something that matches what can work for him. I don't think that they're amazing necessarily, but heck, if they can go and continue to do what they're doing right now, especially against Cowboys, I mean, just thinking about some future opponents here with the Saints, like the Eagles, that'll be tough, but after that they have Atlanta. Kansas City will be tough, but I mean, just looking at some future, they have Denver, they have the Chargers, they have Carolina, they have the Washington Commanders, they have the Giants, Bucks, all games that they can take advantage of some bad decisions by the offense, not just the quarterback, but just some general bad decisions by the offense in general. Do I think they're going to win the division? They were my pick. Yeah, they were. A lot of people were picking Atlanta, which I don't get people's love for them. I don't. But what am I to say anything? I think that the NFC South will be one of the weaker divisions, but the Saints will walk away with about 2 games above 500 to 3 games.
Well, that kind of carries us into our next topic pretty well. The Saints are not the only NFC South team to be off to a 2-0 start. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers pulled it off against who I thought would be one of the best teams in the NFC, in the Detroit Lions. With both teams off to a 2-0 start, who do you think has more potential to continue this run of form later?
So it's close. I'm going to contradict the thing that I just said just by saying I think that Tampa is more sustainable offensively, but I think New Orleans is more sustainable defensively. And that's really hard to tell, to be honest. I think it's going to completely come down to their matchups. I'm going to be honest with you, and those are both coin tosses. I think it's too early to really tell. I really do. I think that Tampa's offense is still just as great as it was in, I won't say in the Brady days, but to the extent of if you take Tom Brady out in the Brady days, their offense is just as good then as it is now.
You know, I'm inclined to agree with you. I'm kind of big on Tampa. I would, as of right now, I would pick them to win the division. I would have to do a deeper dive on their schedule, but I feel like the Saints are super reliant on big plays. Like Rashid Shaheed is constantly getting like 50, 60 yarders. That's not always going to cut it. Granted, the guy is fast, so he will be able to burn by just about anybody on any defense, but that is less sustainable. Like you said, Tampa just feels more solid. They're like a safer pick in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think it's going to come down to their matchups against each other.
And now, next topic, former Panthers quarterback Sam Darnold leads the Minnesota Vikings to a victory over the San Francisco 49ers. This came out of left field to me, Chris. I was honestly shocked. I felt like the 49ers, even without Christian McCaffrey, were a really safe pick in this game. Now, do you think that 49ers fans should be concerned after losing this game to Minnesota and only putting up 17 points with McCaffrey out for at least another 3 weeks?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's hard to tell. It really, really is because if you think about it, Minnesota still has pieces there. I mean, just because that they lost their starting quarterback does not mean that they're completely done. They still have arguably the best route runner in the NFL, and Justin Jefferson, who had shout out to him. He's my NFL shout out of the week, and we're going to have my MLB shout out of the week here on Thursday on my show. Right now, my NFL shout out of the week preemptively before the Sunday night and Monday night game is Justin Jefferson, just because of that 97-yard touchdown. That's the best play that I saw, college or NFL this season by a mile. He burnt two defenders, just incredible. I believe two corners as well, and there was some great footwork and some great moving out of the pocket skills by Sam Darnold. So going back to the Niners point, it's hard to tell. I think a lot of it is going to really depend on just their ability to win division games. Seattle looked good against New England. That's not saying much because New England's not very good. And the Rams also, Cooper Kupp went down. I haven't actually heard anything about that injury. You're going to have to look at that. But still, that division's completely up in the air.
Yeah, Rick Apit, Madden curse strikes again with CMC getting hurt. It sucks because he's not on the Panthers anymore, but I can't help but root for Christian McCaffrey because I don't know, he gave me hope for the Panthers offense. Like, he was electric. I loved watching him in Carolina. So I really hoped he'd succeed in San Francisco. I would have loved to see him win a Super Bowl last year. CMC was getting hurt before he got on the Madden cover. You're not wrong. You're spot on even. I was just hoping that he'd stop getting hurt because he is just amazing to watch. Michael, again, shout out Minnesota. San Fran and Dallas are tied now. I mean, Michael, I almost wish I'd had you on this week just so that we could gang up on you and crap on the Cowboys for that atrocious performance against the Saints. I didn't like the Cowboys before. I like them even less now because I wanted them to beat a division rival, and they couldn't even do that. I thought they were supposed to be good in the regular season, and then they blew it in the postseason, not blowing it in week 2 of the regular season. On to the next topic. Anthony Richardson struggled. Finished the game with 3 interceptions. Do you think that this is a cause for concern for Indianapolis, or is the Green Bay secondary that good?
Green Bay secondary is good. It always has been, and it'll continue to be. And really, I kind of had this as a trap game for the Colts. A lot of people had them as their pick. I had the Packers personally, as you can see on our Football and More page, or Aaron and I's Instagram page, as we do our picks every single week.
Right down
And
there.
that's in his Instagram bio, by the way.
We'll follow it.
Drop that one a follow because we do our weekly picks every single week, and we've dropped some random takes. But putting that aside, overall, another guy. It's hard to tell. I'm really big on him. I think that he can. I think Richardson can recover. I don't really have Indy as being great. I still have Houston running that division fairly easily, but I don't think it's cause for concern for Anthony Richardson's ability. I more so think it's cause for concern of the Colts to make a wild card or maybe even catch up to Houston or something. But I still think that it's not much of an individual cause for concern if you're a Colts fan about your quarterback or your team in general.
And real quick, before we get into our preview of tonight's game, Bears against Texans, Aiden Hutchinson finished the game with 4.5 sacks, 3 of them in the first quarter. Chris, where do you rank Hutchinson on the list of best defensive players in the league?
Top 3, definitely. I mean, he's incredible. I was big on him when he got drafted. He's a Michigan guy. He's a true blue, just, Midwestern guy. He's just a big guy. I mean, that was the most. I mean, we talked about this when we were watching the draft in our draft party. Is this guy is a Dan Campbell kind of guy? This guy is the definition of a Dan Campbell kind of guy. Do I think he's been getting 4 or 5 sacks a game forever? No, obviously not. But this guy can be a J.J. Watt kind of guy. I'm incredibly confident about his ability, and all I can hope, and I'm pretty confident they're not going to because of the turnaround that they've made, that he's not going to end up like a Calvin Johnson kind of person where he's retiring after 8 years. I'm pretty confident this is going to be a long-term thing that can remain successful, not just for Aiden Hutchinson, but also for those Detroit Lions, despite that tough loss today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to see Hutchinson succeed. Michigan football right now is atrocious. That's a whole nother topic that I want to find some outlet to talk about. Davis Warren.
So is WVU, it's okay.
Davis Warren makes me miss Shea Patterson. And Chris, we've talked about Shea Patterson before, and I did not like Shea Patterson in the slightest. But that's a whole nother topic, not for this show. On to tonight. We only got a few minutes left. Bears, Texans. Give me your winner and how much you think they're going to win by.
Texans by, let's say, Texans by 12. I'm going to go with that. Texans by 12 or so. I just think that those receivers, there's too many pieces there. CJ Stroud looks great. And the Bears defense looked better than I thought it would. Caleb Williams is having – this is his first primetime game. And I don't think that it's necessarily all the pressure in the world on him because he's a rookie. But this is his first time in the national stage. This is where everybody's going to be watching. I'm sure everybody's going to be watching Sunday Night Football on NBC tonight. And overall, I got to go with Houston just because of the amount of wide receivers they have that are just freaking amazing. I mean, geez.
But yeah, I mean, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, adding Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Dalton Schultz is a solid tight end. I mean, Houston's loaded. I got to back Houston too. I've been a CJ Stroud guy. I will always be a CJ Stroud guy. I'm going Houston by 17. I think they really handle it. I'm surprised Michael's not in there because he picked the Bears on out of pocket, which is insane. That might be the most out of pocket thing he's said. But Chris, real quick, before we wrap tonight, do you have anything you want to say?
Not really much. I just want to let you guys know that I'll be dropping the newest episode of Dugout Debrief this Thursday at noon. That will be going, and we'll be doing our playoff predictions. There's going to be a lot of content there. It's going to be much longer than it was last week because we have a lot more to talk about. We'll also be talking about some news, and then we'll also be answering that crazy trivia question too, that Ricky Henderson stolen base record trivia question, which you guys need to be putting in some answers for that now. Come on now. So with all that being said, thanks for having me on, man.
Appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. This has been week 2 of the Gridiron Address with me, Aaron Schneider, and Chris Deluca. I hope everyone has a great rest of their night and hope they enjoy some football.
Have a great night.